In contrast to the social historians with a reformist or pragmatic purpose, other historians maintained a more clearly theoretical stance. While in the 1970s the influence of the Annals group was felt, American historians put their own stamp on a social history in the scientific mode. One of its characteristics was a empiricism with a strong quantitative bent. History in the language of numbers. Quantitative history. It should not be surprising that an age uncertain about historical truth eventually discovered the promises of clarity and certainty inherent in quantification, although one must caution against the view that quantification's rise in history was sudden. While our age is predisposed to hope that the logic of numbers will overcome the seeming illogicality of life, that hope has a venerable ancestry. And ancient philosophers such as Pythagoras and Plato and the religious Gnostics had relied on numbers as accesses to the mysteries of life. Without such grand aspirations, historians have, ever since Herodotus, quantified some of their statements in a rudimentary manner, much as most people do. When historians cite typical newspaper editorials and the beliefs of representative men or women, or when they use terms such as significant, widespread, growing, intense, in effect, they are making quantitative statements. Yet, it is also true that quantification by today's quantitative historians goes considerably further in vigor, scope, and sophistication. Both the modern state, in the interest of centralized power, and modern business, in the interest of efficiency, favored the development of quantification. In the process of administering, planning, measuring, and tabulating, they left behind mountains of records which promised rich insights to historians. But there also emerged new expectations for quantification. By the year 1850, some historians who responded to the positivist quest for generalizations, even scientific laws, had become appreciative of the quantitative approach. H.T. Buckle looked for the fixed and universal laws of the human world and expected much help in the search from statistics, or statistic, which he praised as the branch of knowledge, which, though still in its infancy, has already thrown more light on the study of human nature than all the sciences altogether. Clearly, he expected that numbers could help reveal, to a degree not possible otherwise, the ways in which humankind developed. They served no longer, as in the early modes of quantification, merely as shorthand expressions or passive indicators. Properly arranged and interpreted, numbers and numerical relationships could tell historians things that they had not known before. In this case, quantification as a way of expression would then be replaced by quantification as a source of new insights. The favorite fields. Not surprisingly, quantification acquired an especially strong position in economic history. Early on, Febvre and Bloch, the founders of the Annals School, were already calling for a total history which would emphasize social and economic phenomena, a type of history especially well suited to the quantitative approach. Thus, when after 1945 the Annals group triumphed, quantification was assured a proper place in French historiography. Simeon's and Labrusse's quantitative approach was used as serial history, most prominently by Pierre Charnoux. In it, one feature of the world was chosen, quantified for many points in time and place, and then studied in long time sequences. These series of numerical data, reaching over long periods, whether on prices, wages, or population figures, were to yield insights into long-term patterns and trends. Conjunctures. Perhaps it was thought that many such series would eventually add up to a system, a hope not yet borne out. That approach gleaned from the old positivist pattern of from observations to generalizations to a scientific law, was challenged by the Cleometricians, who infused mathematical models into historical research. The American New Economic History, the most prominent advocacy group for cliometrics, took its clues from modern systems theory and econometrics, both of which view reality as a system whose parts are linked to each other in a measurable pattern. Thus, changes in one area affect the whole system. economic reality with so strict a pattern of interdependence makes it possible to construct mathematical models, match them against data, and subsequently assess the model's performance. All of this in quantitative form. As will be seen in a subsequent section, even the highly technical works of economic cliometricians can spark emotional discussions. Quantification penetrated the traditional field of political history as well, when the age of democratization had shifted scholarly interest away from prominent individuals to the masses of people, and when population developments received increased attention. Groups were more accessible to quantitative research, as has been demonstrated by the long series of works on American election returns. In many cases, their results confirmed, and in others, they revised long-held views. For example, the conventional view of the Jacksonian period as a decisive turning point came to be doubted. Again, other studies tried to shed light on problems in social history. Which groups formed the elites, owned the property, won lawsuits, married whom and at what age, supported or opposed governments, could and did move upward in society, made revolutions, had more or less influence, and on ad infinitum. While the variety was endless, two periods received special attention. The early modern period, because of its role as the cradle of industrialization, and the French Revolution as the shaper of modern Europe. After the year 1945, the needs of social history helped transform simple population statistic into the full-fledged and sophisticated discipline of demography. Earlier, a few historians had done some work in estimating population figures, usually on the basis of tax records. Now, demographic inquiry became systematic and was taken up by more scholars, among others those in the Institut National des Études Démographiques, Paris. Some analystes and members of the Cambridge Group for Population and Social Structure. New methods were devised and new sources of data located for studies over long periods. The most detailed and revolutionary results came through the reconstitution of family technique used by Louis Henry, Michel Fleury, and E.A. Wrigley, where all information relating to families were recorded on reconstitution forms. With data from parish records, sometimes stretching over centuries, one could then compile exact rates of marriages, fertility, and mortality. The results were enlightening, but the problems encountered were formidable. Records were seldom rich enough. Data gathering took such an inordinate amount of time that the scope of research projects, and with it, data interpretation, remained narrow. A multitude of such projects will have to be carried out until an accurate picture of the whole can emerge, and the data in such publications as the Histoire Générale de la Population Mondiale will need less constant revising than now. The chores of quantitative history, data collecting, storing, and processing, have been made less formidable by the advent of special machines, especially that of the computer. The use of computers facilitated the work of quantitative historians, but cost and time considerations encouraged collective efforts, particularly in the field of data collecting and storing. That in turn enhanced the institutionalization of quantitative history. The Annals Group had its sixth section of the École pratique des hautes études. Americans chose voluntary association. In 1963, the American Historical Association established a committee on quantitative data. A year after the Inter-University Consortium for Political Research at the University of Michigan was founded, and finally in 1967, the Historical Methods newsletter appeared. Today, however, the computer has made a clear imprint on historiography. Its main advantage is its large memory and the quick retrieval of data from it, as well as its facility for doing complicated computations speedily and accurately. Still, the large-scale computer research projects take many years of work by research teams and consume vast financial resources in the preparation of the database. Examples are the study of the French censuses of conscripts from 1819 to 1930 by Leroy Ladurie, D. Hurley's analysis of the 1427 Florentine catasto and early income and property tax, and a number of American census studies. By now, quantitative history has joined the mainstream of historiography. Scholarly battles will always be fought over where the proper borders of quantification are to be drawn. Quantification, like all emerging scholarly enterprises, has had its enthusiasts who have claimed too much. For them, the solution to all puzzles of history had been found. Those a bit less visionary simply expected that within 2 decades or so, a significant segment of American historians would use quantification as their primary tool. Opponents have rejected the claims by quantifiers to undistorted objectivity and have pointed out how not even the quantitative historian escaped the need for personal choices. The latter entered into the initial hypotheses which researchers needed in order to structure their data collecting and interpreting. These hypotheses were not results of research, but a matter of choice. Many opponents have been most alarmed by what radical quantifiers assumed about the human realm. Where does the preoccupation with quantifiable general insights, trends, and forces leave the singularity of a situation or the specific and unique event? While acknowledging the scholarly spirit and the contributions of quantitative historians, author Schlesinger Jr. expressed the fundamental problem with quantification. Quote, "As a humanist, I am bound to reply to that almost all important questions are important precisely because they are not susceptible to quantitative answers." End quote. When the smoke clears and the noise abates, after scholarly battles, outright winners and losers are usually rare. In the present uneasy truce, the debate goes on, and so does quantitative work. The value of quantification within clear limits has been conceded, and most quantifiers are now satisfied with narrower claims. In this perspective, quantification represents a further refinement of the already sophisticated historical methodology, serving, according to William O.A. Delot, primarily as a means of verifying general statements in history. Quantification also has shown that it does best in analyzing areas of human life where human beings act in ways that are prompted by observable and clearly definable circumstances, or by a few easily isolated motives, and do so in large numbers. Many historians, however, doubt that the area of purely habitual behavior, or behavior resulting from simple internal or external stimuli, is large. On their part, quantitative historians could point out that modern society has enlarged precisely that area, and that the increasing rationalization of government in modern times offers great masses of quantitative material. The objection that quantitative methods are of small use for earlier periods with little material to work with has some justification, although it has been diffused partially by innovators who have devised new quantitative accesses to the past, such as exploration of neglected legal archives, extensive scouting, and a more sophisticated analysis of population data, lists of office holders, and conscription lists.